The planet Zephyra was unlike any world Cale Thorne had ever seen. Its skies glowed with soft shades of violet and gold, and enormous crystal trees rose from the ground like towers of light. Floating islands drifted lazily in the distance, connected by shimmering energy bridges that sparkled with every movement of the wind. Cale, a human warrior trained in the most dangerous battlefields of Earth, had come to this planet on a mission of peace, but the moment he set foot on Zephyra, he realized this world was full of both beauty and danger. Cale's boots sank slightly into the soft, glowing moss beneath him as he scanned the horizon. His team of humans had been sent to establish relations with the Zephyrians, the planet's intelligent inhabitants. But not all Zephyrians were friendly. Rogue factions roamed the forests, attacking travelers and scavenging resources. Kyle had seen enough battles to know that one wrong step could mean death. "Keep your eyes open," Cale whispered into his communicator, his voice steady despite the tension. "This place looks peaceful, but it's a trap waiting to happen." His team nodded silently. Each human was trained for extreme situations, but Cale had a feeling that Zephyra would test them in ways Earth never had. Suddenly, a distant scream cut through the air, sharp and desperate. Cale's instincts kicked in immediately. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the sound, his combat armor shifting with ease as he navigated the uneven terrain. When he arrived, he found a shocking sight. A young Zephyrian, barely older than a human teenager, was trapped beneath a collapsed crystal formation. Her skin shimmered with a pale blue light, and her large, luminous eyes were filled with pain. Blood from a deep wound stained the ground around her, mixing with the glowing moss and creating a strange, haunting scene. Cale's heart skipped a beat. "Hold on," he shouted, dropping to his knees beside her. "I'm going to get you out." The Zephyrian looked at him with fear and confusion. She spoke in her language, a melodic sound filled with urgency, but Cale couldn't understand her words. Still, the meaning was clear. She was in grave danger. Cale lifted the crystal debris, with a strength born from both training and desperation, freeing her small frame. She collapsed into his arms, her breathing shallow. Cale checked her wounds. "She's poisoned," a medic on his team said, arriving moments later. "This isn't a normal injury. She needs immediate treatment." A Zephyrian elder, who had arrived silently behind them, knelt beside the princess. His translucent robes shimmered like the crystals around them. "Her life is fading," he said in halting English. "Only a rare transfusion, a human blood transfusion, may stabilize her temporarily. Then we can find the cure." Kyle's eyes widened. The thought of giving his own blood to an alien, it was unprecedented, dangerous, and terrifying. But when he looked into the princess's eyes, he saw something that made him decide instantly. Her life depended on him, and despite their differences, he could not leave her to die. "I'll do it," he said firmly. "Prepare the transfusion." The elders and medics looked shocked. Cale's bravery, or perhaps recklessness, left them speechless. But time was short. The poison was spreading fast, and every second counted. Cale rolled up his sleeve and let the medics begin the process. As the crimson liquid entered the princess's body, Cale felt a strange connection. It was as if a tiny thread of life had tied him to her. Her eyes fluttered, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. Cale held her hand gently, trying to provide comfort. "It's going to be okay," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Minutes passed like hours. Then, slowly, color returned to her luminous skin, and her breathing stabilized. She looked at Kyle with wide, trusting eyes, and for a moment the difference between human and Zephyrian seemed meaningless. They had shared something deeper than words, a bond forged in the fire of life and death. "You saved me," she said, her voice a soft echo, almost musical. Kyle shook his head. "No," he replied. "We saved each other." But the moment of relief was short-lived. The surrounding forest suddenly erupted with movement. Rogue Zephyrians, armed, aggressive, and clearly aware of the princess's weakened state, emerged from the trees. They saw Cale and the princess as easy targets. Cale's heart tightened. He had expected danger, but he hadn't expected it to come so soon. "Get behind me," Kale shouted, positioning himself between the princess and the attackers. He drew his weapon, a sleek plasma rifle capable of cutting through the toughest materials. The rogues hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by the human's confidence and readiness. Kale didn't wait. He fired a warning shot into the ground, sending a shower of sparks into the air. "Leave now, or you'll regret it," he warned. But the rogues advanced, their intentions clear. They wanted the princess alive or dead. It didn't matter. Kyle's mind raced. He had to protect her at all costs, but he also had to think strategically. The terrain was in his favor. The crystals could be used as cover, and the glowing moss was slightly slippery, giving him an advantage if the rogues charged recklessly. As the first rogue lunged at him, Kyle sidestepped with precision and used his momentum to push the attacker into a crystal formation. The impact sent a brilliant light flashing across the clearing, momentarily blinding the other attackers. Kyle grabbed the princess's hand. "Run!" he commanded. Together, they moved toward a narrow path that led deeper into the forest, a path Kale had noticed on his way there. The princess followed, her small hand gripping his tightly. Despite her recent ordeal, there was determination in her movement, a spark of life Kale hadn't seen before. He couldn't help but admire her courage. She wasn't just a helpless princess. She was strong, intelligent, and ready to fight for her survival. As they ran, Kale could feel the connection between them growing stronger. Every glance, every shared breath seemed to tie them together. It was as if his blood had done more than stabilize her. It had created a bridge, a bond that neither of them fully understood yet. Finally, they reached a small clearing where the light of the setting sun pierced through the crystal canopy. Kyle took a moment to catch his breath, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere they can't find us easily." The princess nodded, her large eyes shining with trust. Kyle realized that this moment was the beginning of something extraordinary. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect her, no matter the cost. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Kale instinctively pulled the princess behind him as massive crystal shards began rising from the earth, forming jagged towers around them. It was a natural defense mechanism of the planet, reacting to the intrusion of violence in its territory. Kale felt a thrill of awe. Zephyra was alive and it was watching. "We're not alone here," he whispered, his eyes scanning the horizon. "This planet, it's more alive than I imagined." The princess leaned slightly closer to him, her hand still in his. In that silent moment, Kale felt an unspoken promise between them: to survive, to fight, and to discover what lay beyond the dangers that awaited. The bond of blood was more than survival. It was the start of a partnership that could change the fate of Zephyra, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Kale looked up at the glowing sky, taking a deep breath. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." The princess's hand tightened around his, a silent agreement. And as the first stars began to twinkle above the crystal forests, Kale felt a strange sense of hope. A human and an alien, bound by courage and sacrifice, had just begun a journey that neither could have imagined. The echoes of the rogue faction's footsteps faded behind them, but Kale knew this was only the beginning. Danger, discovery, and perhaps even destiny awaited. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that giving his blood had done more than save a life. It had opened the door to something unbelievable. The sun had barely risen over the crystal forests of Zephyra when Kale and Princess Lyra awoke in a hidden glade. The glow of the morning sun reflected off the crystalline trees, casting rainbow-like patterns across the soft, shimmering ground. For a moment, the world seemed calm, almost peaceful, but Kale knew better. Danger was never far away on Zephyra, especially now that Lyra's life had been saved, and especially now that she was connected to him in a way no one fully understood. Lyra stirred, her luminous eyes slowly opening. She looked at Kale with curiosity and gratitude, a soft smile forming on her delicate face. I feel different," she said, her voice melodic but unsure. Stronger, yet calmer. What did you do? Kyle shook his head with a faint smile. I just did what anyone would do. I gave you my blood to save your life. He paused, watching her carefully. But it seems something more happened. Lyra slowly sat up, flexing her fingers and noticing the energy that now seemed to flow through her. The wounds that had once marked her body were gone, leaving only faint traces of glowing lines like delicate circuits on her skin. She flexed, her arms experimentally, and to her astonishment, a ripple of energy pulsed outward, making the crystals nearby hum softly. Kale's eyes widened. He had seen advanced alien technology and unusual powers before, but this was new. The transfusion hadn't just stabilized her, it had awakened something latent within her, something that seemed to respond to his presence. Kyle took a cautious step closer, feeling a strange warmth and energy in the air. You're connected to me, he said quietly. I can feel your emotions, your fear, your hope. It's like I can sense you. Lyra's eyes widened in shock. And I can feel you too, she whispered. It's like we share the same heartbeat. Kyle nodded slowly. Then we need to understand this connection. If we don't, it might be dangerous, especially if others find out. The rest of the morning passed in cautious exploration. Lyra discovered that she could manipulate the energy of the planet, bending it slightly with thought and intention. She could lift small stones, create glowing barriers, and even amplify her voice into a powerful resonance that made the air vibrate. Kyle watched in awe, realizing that the transfusion had unlocked an extraordinary potential in her, blending human resilience with Zephyrian energy. Kale tested himself as well. His senses felt sharper. He could see the subtle movements of distant birds, hear the faint hum of the crystals, and sense approaching danger even before it appeared. The bond between him and Lyra made them almost a single entity in movement and thought. They practiced together, learning each other's strengths, and a strange harmony grew between them. You're a quick learner, Kale said, ducking as a crystal shard suddenly shot up from the ground during a training exercise. But don't underestimate Zephyra. The planet itself is alive. It reacts to energy, and sometimes it can be unpredictable. Lyra nodded, her focus intense. I will learn. I want to protect my people, and I want to protect you too. Kyle smiled faintly, touched by her words. Then we start training. I'll teach you what I know about combat, strategy, and survival. And you, teach me about your powers. Together, we'll be stronger than anyone expects. Their training continued for days, each one growing more skilled and more synchronized. They began to anticipate each other's movements, Kale using his tactical mind, while Lyra used her energy manipulation to defend and attack. They practiced on the floating crystal bridges across the glowing moss fields and even near the cliffs that hovered above the clouds. Each day their bond strengthened, and each day they became more aware of the extraordinary link between them. But Zephyra was not without danger. News of the princess's survival and her unusual bond with a human spread quickly among the Zephyrian factions. Some saw Kale's actions as a symbol of hope and unity between humans and Zephyrians. Others, especially rogue groups and ambitious warlords, saw it as a threat. They whispered rumors of a hybrid protector, a being of two worlds who could change the balance of power forever. One evening, while resting in the glade after a long day of training, Kale noticed movement in the distance. Shadows shifted unnaturally among the trees, and he tensed. We're not alone, he murmured. Lyra's hand instinctively found his, and he felt her pulse through the bond they shared. A group of rogue Zephyrians emerged, their weapons glinting in the soft light. They had tracked Lyra and Kale, intending to capture the princess once again, but this time Kale was ready. He signaled to Lyra, and together they prepared to defend themselves. The battle began swiftly. The rogues charged, thinking they would catch the pair off guard, but Kale and Lyra moved with perfect coordination. Kale's strategic mind guided them, predicting enemy movements, while Lyra's energy manipulation created shields and barriers, deflecting attacks and controlling the battlefield. The rogues were stunned. Never had they seen such a combination of skill and power. Lyra's confidence grew with every strike, every successful defense. She began to experiment, combining her abilities in ways she hadn't imagined. She could lift multiple enemies with energy waves, and even create protective domes that allowed Kale to fight from within. Kale, in turn, marveled at her adaptability and courage. He realized that the transfusion had done more than save her life. It had unlocked potential neither of them fully understood. After the rogues were defeated, Kyle and Lyra stood amidst the shattered crystal formations, breathing heavily but triumphant. Lyra looked at Kale with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I never thought I could do this," she admitted. "It's incredible." Kale shook his head, smiling. "You didn't do it alone. We did it together. That's what makes us strong." As they returned to their hidden glade, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The bond created by his blood had connected them in ways that went beyond survival. It was a link of trust, courage, and destiny. And he had the growing sense that the universe itself was about to test them in ways they could never imagine. Over the next few days, Kyle and Lyra continued their exploration of the forest, discovering hidden valleys, energy springs, and ancient Zephyrian ruins. In the ruins, they found inscriptions that seemed to speak of a prophecy, one that mentioned a protector born of two worlds, a being who would bring balance and peace when the planet was threatened. Kyle read the words aloud, his voice low and steady. "A bond of life shall awaken the protector. A union of courage and spirit shall bring hope." Lyra's eyes widened as she listened. "Could it be us?" she asked quietly. Kale shook his head slowly, though he couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. "I don't know, but one thing is clear. We have been chosen for something greater than ourselves. And if that's true, we must be ready for whatever comes next." That night, under the glowing stars of Zephyra, Kale and Lyra sat by a small energy spring. The water shimmered with a soft light, reflecting the bond that now tied them together. They spoke of their fears, their hopes, and their plans for the future. Kale shared stories of Earth and his life as a warrior, while Lyra taught him about Zephyrian culture, their connection to the planet, and the delicate balance that maintained their world. In those moments, Kale realized something profound. The transfusion had not only saved Lyra, it had changed him as well. He felt more attuned to the universe, more connected to life itself. And he understood that courage was not just about fighting. It was about compassion, trust, and the willingness to risk everything for another being. As the night deepened, Kale looked at Lyra and smiled faintly. "We're going to face many challenges," he said softly. "But together, I believe we can overcome anything." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Together," she echoed. The bond forged by blood, courage, and trust was no longer just a lifeline. It had become a connection that would guide them through the trials ahead. And Kale knew, deep in his heart, that their journey was only beginning. The forest was quiet now, but Kale's senses remained alert. He could feel the planet watching, the energy flowing around them, and the distant presence of threats that would test their strength and unity. But he also knew that with Lyra by his side, they were ready to face the unknown, ready to face destiny. And as the first light of Zephyra's sun broke over the horizon, Kale Thorne and Princess Lyra stood together, a human and an alien bound by blood and bravery, prepared to face the incredible challenges that lay ahead. The days following Kale and Princess Lyra's discovery of the prophecy were filled with both excitement and caution. They spent hours in the floating crystal forests, training, exploring, and learning from each other. Kale honed Lyra's combat instincts, showing her how to anticipate attacks, use her surroundings, and combine strategy with speed. Lyra, in turn, guided Kale in understanding the energy of Zephyra, how the planet itself could be used as both shield and weapon. But even in the beauty of Zephyra, danger was never far. Whispers of Kale's heroism had reached every corner of the planet, carried by travelers, merchants, and wandering factions. While many Zephyrians began to see the human warrior as a symbol of hope, others saw him and Lyra as a threat to the balance of power. A rogue faction, led by the cunning warlord Vorak, had learned about the princess's survival and the unusual bond between human and alien. Vorak's followers were ruthless, trained in both ancient Zephyrian martial arts and modern weaponry. They believed capturing Lyra would give them control over the royal lineage and potentially harness the strange power that Kale's blood had awakened in her. Vorak had no patience for diplomacy or mercy. He only wanted power. Kale sensed the danger first. While scouting a ridge overlooking the crystal plains, he noticed movement in the distance, shadows that moved with purpose, not randomness. He squinted against the sun, counting at least a dozen figures approaching quickly. "They're coming," Kyle muttered, gripping his weapon. He turned to Lyra, who was observing the forest from a nearby cliff. "We have company, and they're not friendly." Lyra's eyes narrowed. The connection between them pulsed slightly like a silent alarm. She could sense the intent of the approaching group, their aggression, their hunger for power. "They want me," she said softly. "And they will stop at nothing." Kyle nodded, a tight determination settling over him. "Then we stop them first. But we do it smart. We fight together, not just with weapons, but with the bond we share. Ready?" Lyra clenched her hands, energy crackling faintly around her fingertips. "Ready." The rogue faction arrived with surprising speed, charging across the glowing moss. Vorak himself rode atop a massive crystal beast, its limbs sharp as blades and its roar shaking the ground. The rogues believed their numbers would overwhelm Kale and Lyra, but they underestimated the synergy between human and alien. Kale moved like a shadow, his every motion calculated. He used the terrain, leaping across crystal ridges and sliding under energy bridges. Lyra followed, using her abilities to manipulate the environment, raising crystal shards to block attacks, creating barriers of energy to protect Kale, and even lifting enemies into the air briefly to disorient them. Vorak's eyes narrowed as he observed the pair. "Impossible," he muttered. "A human controlling Zephyrian energy, and the princess fighting with him?" Kyle and Lyra fought as one. When Kyle moved forward to engage a group of rogues, Lyra amplified his movements, sending bursts of energy that knocked opponents off balance. When Lyra needed to create a protective shield, Kyle positioned himself strategically, allowing her to maximize her power while minimizing risk. Every strike, every motion was perfectly timed. The rogue faction, though skilled, began to falter. Their attacks were strong but uncoordinated. Kale's strategy and Lyra's newfound abilities made them unpredictable, almost untouchable. Vorak roared in frustration, slamming a massive fist into the ground and sending shockwaves that shattered nearby crystals. But even this did not break Kale or Lyra's focus. During a brief pause in the battle, Kale and Lyra regrouped behind a towering crystal spire. Lyra's energy was visibly waning from the constant exertion, and Kale knew they needed a plan. "We can't just hold them off forever," he said. "We need to turn the tide or they'll overwhelm us." Lyra nodded, understanding the urgency. She closed her eyes for a moment, drawing energy not just from herself but from the planet. The ground beneath them vibrated faintly as crystals began to hum and glow brighter. The connection between Kale and Lyra pulsed, stronger than before, as if the planet itself was responding to their bond. Kale's eyes widened. "You're going to amplify your power, using the planet?" Lyra nodded, her voice calm and focused. "We have no choice. If we survive, it will be because we trust each other completely." The next moment, Lyra released a pulse of energy that radiated outward in all directions. The rogues were thrown back, some landing in tangled heaps, others leaping desperately to avoid the blast. The air shimmered with the force of the energy, and Kale moved instantly, taking down any opponent who tried to recover. Vorak's beast roared, but Lyra's energy was too strong. With Kale directing their attacks, they managed to immobilize the creature temporarily, trapping it between crystal pillars raised by Lyra. Vorak leapt off the beast, furious, and charged toward Kale with a blade glowing with alien energy. Kale anticipated the strike, sidestepping with lightning speed and using his rifle's energy pulse to knock the weapon aside. Vorak stumbled, but quickly regained his balance. He glared at the human warrior. "You will pay for this," he shouted, his voice echoing through the forest. Lyra stepped forward, her energy barrier forming around Kale. "Not today," she said firmly. She raised her hands, sending a focused beam of energy at Vorak, forcing him to retreat temporarily. The rogue leader's eyes blazed with fury, but he realized that brute force alone would not win this fight. Kale and Lyra knew this was only a temporary victory. The rogues were scattered for now, but they would regroup, stronger and more determined. They needed a safe place to plan their next move, somewhere hidden from Vorak's reach. Kale looked at Lyra. "We need to move. Follow me." They sprinted, through the forest, moving swiftly and silently. The bond between them guided their movements. Kale sensed threats before they appeared, and Lyra used her abilities to manipulate the environment, creating obstacles to slow any pursuers. After hours of careful navigation, they reached a secluded valley surrounded by towering crystal cliffs. It was a perfect hideout, hidden, defensible, and rich with energy they could draw upon. As they rested, Lyra turned to Kale. "I never imagined I could fight like that," she said, still catching her breath. "And I never imagined a human could be so connected to me." Kyle smiled faintly. "Neither did I. But we are stronger together. That bond, the one created when I gave you my blood, it's more than life-saving. It's a connection that makes us almost unstoppable." Lyra nodded, her eyes glowing softly. "Then we must use it wisely. Vorak will not give up. He will return with more forces, and next time, it could be worse." Kyle placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we prepare, we train, we plan, and we get stronger. And we do it together." For the next few days, they focused on strengthening their bond, refining their strategies, and learning to anticipate each other's movements. Kyle taught Lyra advanced combat tactics, how to read opponents' intentions, and how to use her energy in ways that maximized efficiency while conserving strength. Lyra taught Kale to feel the planet's energy, to sense danger before it appeared, and to connect with her in ways that enhanced both their abilities. Their teamwork became almost intuitive. Kale could predict Lyra's attacks before she made them, and Lyra could react instantly to Kale's signals. No words necessary. Together, they were a force that combined human ingenuity with alien power, something the rogues had never seen and could not hope to match. But even as they trained, Kale could feel the tension building. The rogues would not remain idle for long. Vorak was clever, ruthless, and patient. He would study them, learn their weaknesses, and return stronger. Kale knew that their bond and training had given them an advantage, but the real test was still to come, a test that would challenge their strength, their courage, and the very connection that now tied them together. That night, under the glowing stars of Zephyra, Kale and Lyra sat atop a crystal cliff, overlooking the valley below. The wind carried the faint hum of the forest, and the distant echoes of the rogues reminded them that danger was never far away. Kyle spoke quietly. "We've won this battle, but the war isn't over. Vorak will return, and next time, we may not have the same luck." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Then we prepare. We get stronger, faster, smarter, and we face him together." Kale placed his hand over hers, feeling the steady pulse of life, energy, and determination. "Together," he agreed. And so, Kale Thorne and Princess Lyra stood united, ready to face the growing threat, their bond stronger than ever, and their courage unshakable. The rogues were only the beginning. Ahead lay challenges, mysteries, and battles that would test not just their strength, but the incredible connection that had been forged by blood, trust, and bravery. The valley where Kale and Princess Lyra hid had become their sanctuary, a place where they could train, plan, and strengthen the bond that had saved them in battle. Days turned into weeks as they honed their skills, blending human strategy with Zephyrian energy manipulation. Lyra's powers grew stronger every day, and Kale's senses became sharper, guided by the connection that pulsed between them. Yet despite the peace of the valley, a sense of urgency hung over them. Vorak was still out there, gathering his forces, planning his return. Kyle knew that the rogue warlord would not strike until he had overwhelming numbers. And when that day came, they would need more than courage. They would need a plan, and they would need to understand the strange forces now flowing through Lyra. One morning, Lyra led Kale to a hidden cavern deep within the cliffs. The entrance was concealed behind a wall of glowing crystals, which shimmered softly in the morning light. Inside, the cavern walls were covered with ancient Zephyrian inscriptions and murals. They depicted scenes of heroes, battles, and strange glowing figures that seemed to merge human and Zephyrian forms. Kale's eyes widened. This looks ancient, he said. Much older than anything I've seen on Zephyra so far. Lyra traced her fingers over the inscriptions. These murals, they tell a story, she said softly. A story of a protector born from two worlds, a being with the courage of a human and the energy of Zephyra. The legends call this protector the Hybrid Guardian. Kyle took a deep breath. Hybrid Guardian? That sounds like us? Lyra nodded slowly. It could be. The story says that when the planet is in great danger, a bond of two worlds will awaken a protector, one who will defend Zephyra and bring balance. She paused, her eyes meeting Kale's. I think your blood didn't just save me, it awakened something in me, and in you. Together, we might be that protector. Kale felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He had faced countless battles in his life, but nothing like this. Nothing that tied him so deeply to another being, to a planet, and to a destiny far greater than himself. Then we need to be ready, he said firmly. If Vorak attacks, we cannot fail. Not for you, not for the planet. Lyra nodded. I agree. But we also need to understand how to use this power fully. The murals show figures using energy in ways I don't yet understand. We must study them carefully. They spent the next several days deciphering the cavern's inscriptions. They discovered techniques to channel Zephyrian energy more efficiently, methods to combine human strategy with energy manipulation, and hints about a special power that could only be awakened through trust and unity. The deeper they studied, the clearer it became. The Hybrid Guardian was not just about strength, it was about connection, courage, and intelligence. Meanwhile, Vorak was not idle. Hidden in the shadows of distant mountains, he trained his forces, teaching them to exploit weaknesses, to anticipate the bond between Kyle and Lyra. He had studied the way the two moved together, watched their victories, and realized that brute force alone would not defeat them. Vorak needed strategy, cunning, and overwhelming numbers. One night, as Kale and Lyra rested in the valley, a sudden tremor shook the ground. Crystals vibrated, humming with a deep resonance that echoed through the cliffs. Lyra's eyes widened, and she grabbed Kale's arm. Something is coming, she whispered. The planet, it's warning us. Kale's instincts sharpened instantly. Get ready. Whatever it is, we face it together. From the horizon, a dark wave approached, an army unlike any they had seen. Vorak had returned, and this time he commanded not just a rogue faction, but an organized force of hundreds. Crystal-armored soldiers marched in perfect formation, and massive war machines hovered above, ready to strike. The ground shook beneath their weight. Kyle and Lyra moved to a high vantage point overlooking the approaching army. Kyle felt the tension in the air, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. We can't fight them all directly, he said, his mind racing. We need to use the terrain, the planet, and our bond to our advantage. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly as she focused on the valley below. I can manipulate the energy to create barriers and traps, but it will drain me quickly. I'll need your help to conserve strength." Kyle nodded. "We'll work together. I'll coordinate movements, draw their attention, and you strike when the time is right." As the first wave of soldiers advanced into the valley, Kale and Lyra sprang into action. Lyra raised her hands, sending pulses of energy that lifted massive boulders from the cliffs, creating barriers and crushing advancing soldiers. Kale moved with precision, using his rifle to disable war machines and his combat skills to take down enemy soldiers. The synergy between them was breathtaking. Human strategy and alien power intertwined seamlessly. Vorak, observing from his command platform, gritted his teeth. "They are stronger than I imagined," he muttered. "But no bond can withstand everything. They will tire, and then they will fall." The battle raged for hours. Lyra's energy manipulation kept the army at bay, but each pulse drained her strength. Kyle moved tirelessly, protecting her from direct attacks and guiding her. Focus. Despite the exhaustion, their bond remained unbroken, each feeding off the other's determination and courage. During a brief lull in the fighting, Kyle looked at Lyra. "We can't keep this up forever. We need something more, something that will turn the tide completely." Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. The prophecy, it mentioned a final power that can only be awakened through trust, courage, and unity. "We need to reach that level." Kyle placed a hand over hers. "Then we trust each other completely. No hesitation, no doubt. Together we can do this." Focusing on their bond, Lyra and Kale synchronized their movements, hearts and minds connected in a way that transcended species. Energy flowed from Lyra, amplified by Kale's presence and guidance. The crystals around them resonated, glowing brighter and brighter, until the entire valley pulsed with a dazzling light. The army hesitated, momentarily stunned by the display of power. Vorak's eyes widened in shock. "Impossible. What is this?" he shouted, realizing that brute force would not succeed. Kale and Lyra struck as one. Lyra sent a massive wave of energy sweeping through the valley, knocking down soldiers and war machines alike. Kale moved through the chaos with precision, disabling remaining threats and protecting Lyra from any attack that slipped through. The combination of strategy, courage, and energy was unstoppable. By the end of the battle, the rogue army lay scattered, defeated, and demoralized. Vorak, wounded and furious, retreated with what remained of his forces. Kale and Lyra stood together, exhausted but triumphant, the valley around them glowing softly from the energy that still lingered. Lyra turned to Kale, her eyes filled with awe. We did it. Together." Kale nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes. But this is only the beginning. The prophecy, the bond. It's clear now. We are meant for something greater, and we must be ready for what comes next." The realization settled over them both. They were not just survivors. They were the hybrid guardian, chosen to protect Zephyra and bring balance to a world threatened by greed, power, and darkness. Their journey was far from over, but for the first time they understood the true extent of their potential and the incredible bond that had made it all possible. As night fell over the glowing valley, Kale and Lyra sat together atop a crystal cliff, watching the stars. The bond between them pulsed quietly, a steady rhythm of trust, courage, and unity. They had faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious, but they knew that the challenges ahead would be even greater. Kale spoke softly, breaking the silence. "No matter what comes next, we face it together. That's the only way we survive, and the only way we protect this world." Lyra nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the starlight. "Together," she echoed, and in that moment, Kale understood something profound. The transfusion had been more than an act of courage. It had been the start of a destiny far greater than either of them could have imagined. They were not just a human and an alien. They were a force of hope, a symbol of unity, and the protectors of a world that had already begun to trust in their strength, courage, and unbreakable bond. The valley was quiet now, but the energy in the air hummed with life. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Vorak would return and new threats would arise. Yet Kale and Lyra felt ready, stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever. Together they would face the impossible, protect Zephyra, and uncover the full power of the bond that had saved a princess, awakened a warrior, and begun a journey that would change the fate of an entire world. The morning sky over Zephyra was a brilliant shade of violet, streaked with gold and silver. The crystal forest shimmered softly in the dawn, but the beauty of the world could not hide the tension in the air. Kale Thorn and Princess Lyra stood on a cliff overlooking the valley, their eyes scanning the horizon. Today would be the ultimate test. Vorak had returned with his full army, and he was determined to conquer Zephyra once and for all. Kyle tightened the straps of his armor and checked his rifle, though he knew that weapons alone would not win this battle. Lyra, glowing faintly, with energy, adjusted the flowing sleeves of her robe, her hands sparking with the power that had grown stronger with every day of training. The bond between them pulsed quietly, a constant rhythm of life, courage, and trust. They were ready. "We can't let them reach the capital," Kyle said firmly. "If Vorak takes control there, everything will be lost. We have to hold him here in the valley where we have the advantage." Lyra nodded. "I will do everything I can, but I need you to guide me. We must strike together as one." Kyle took a deep breath. "Then let's do it." The first wave of Vorak's army appeared over the horizon, hundreds of soldiers moving in perfect formation, war machines hovering above them, ready to unleash destruction. Kyle and Lyra descended into the valley, taking their positions among the natural defenses and the crystalline terrain. Kyle signaled to Lyra, and she raised her hands, sending waves of energy that caused the crystals to rise like jagged towers, forming barriers and trenches. Soldiers stumbled over the new obstacles, their advance slowed by the shifting terrain. Kyle moved swiftly, taking down enemies who tried to bypass the barriers, directing Lyra where to focus her energy for maximum impact. Vorak watched from his command platform, his face twisted in rage. "They have grown stronger," he shouted. "Use everything we have, crush them." The battle escalated quickly. Kyle and Lyra fought in perfect synchrony, a combination of human skill and Zypherian power that seemed unstoppable. Lyra's energy, pulses created shields that deflected incoming projectiles, while Kyle's tactical moves allowed them to outmaneuver the enemy. They were a force the army had never encountered, but Vorak was cunning. He deployed a massive war machine, a towering construct of crystal and metal, bristling with weapons. Its sheer size made it nearly unstoppable, and it began tearing through the valley, crushing barriers and scattering soldiers. Kale realized that raw power alone would not defeat it. They needed strategy, precision, and unity. "Lyra!" Kale shouted. "We need to combine our powers, focus together, concentrate on the core of that machine." Lyra nodded, raising her hands high. Energy flowed through her like a river, bright and intense. Kale joined the flow, extending his presence and will into the energy. The bond between them pulsed stronger than ever, and the crystals around the valley resonated in response. Together they formed a beam of energy so powerful that it cut through the machine, shattering it into fragments that rained across the battlefield. The soldiers faltered, and the remaining war machines were no match for their combined power. Vorak's forces began to retreat, panic spreading among them. But the warlord himself did not flee. Mounted on his crystal beast, he roared and charged toward Kale and Lyra, determined to end this himself. Kale stepped forward, weapon ready, but he knew brute force would not work. Vorak was fast, cunning, and desperate. Lyra raised her barrier, but Vorak smashed through it with sheer momentum. They had only one chance, to use the full extent of their bond, the ultimate power of the hybrid guardian. "Now, Lyra," Kyle shouted. "Everything we've learned, together." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing all her energy, all her courage, and all her trust in Kale. The crystals around them rose higher than ever, forming towers, spikes, and walls of light. Energy swirled in a dazzling vortex, pulsing with life, power, and determination. Kale and Lyra directed it together, their hearts and minds perfectly synchronized. Vorak's beast charged, but the vortex engulfed it, lifting it off the ground. The warlord tried to escape, but the energy surged, trapping him in a prism of light. The army watched in awe and fear as Kale and Lyra, human and alien united, stood at the center of the storm, the hybrid guardian fully awakened. With a final, focused surge, the energy wave expanded outward, sweeping across the battlefield. Soldiers and machines were thrown back, disarmed and immobilized without loss of life. The force was precise, controlled, and unstoppable. When the light faded, the valley was silent. Vorak lay defeated, restrained by the energy prisms, his army scattered and surrendering. Kale lowered his hands, breathing heavily, and Lyra opened her eyes, exhausted but radiant. They looked at each other, knowing that they had not just won a battle, they had fulfilled a destiny. The Zephyrian capital sent emissaries immediately, arriving to witness the aftermath. They looked upon Kale and Lyra with awe, respect, and gratitude. The Council of Elders stepped forward, bowing deeply. "You have saved our people," one elder said. "Not just with strength, but with courage, wisdom, and unity. You are the true hybrid guardian, the protector our planet needed." Lyra smiled faintly, still glowing with residual energy. "It was not just me," she said softly. "Kyle was by my side. We were together. That is what made us strong." Kyle shook his head humbly. "We both fought. But it was more than fighting. It was trust, understanding, and the willingness to risk everything. That's what truly matters." The people of Zephyra celebrated their victory, not only for the defeat of Vorak, but for the union of human and alien. Kale had not only saved the princess, but had become a symbol of hope, courage, and the potential for unity between worlds. In the days that followed, Kale and Lyra trained new defenders of Zephyra, teaching them the importance of strategy, courage, and connection. Lyra's powers became a guiding force for the planet, and Kale's human ingenuity brought new ideas for defense, diplomacy, and exploration. Together, they built a stronger, more united world. But the greatest change was not just in their abilities, it was in the bond they shared. Human and alien, warrior and princess, they had discovered that courage and selflessness could transcend differences, forge unbreakable ties, and inspire entire civilizations. One evening, atop a high crystal spire overlooking the capital, Kale and Lyra stood together, watching the sunset paint the skies in shades of violet and gold. The wind carried the soft hum of the crystals, and the city below sparkled with life and energy. Kale placed his hand over Lyra's. "We did it," he said quietly. "The impossible. We achieved it together." Lyra nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Yes, and this is just the beginning. There will be challenges, dangers, and trials ahead, but we face them together, as one." Kyle smiled faintly. "Together," he echoed. In that moment it was clear. The bond forged by a simple act of courage, a human giving his blood to save a princess, had changed the fate of a world. Kale and Lyra had become more than warrior and princess. They were symbols of hope, unity, and the incredible potential that arises when life is protected with courage and selflessness. The planet of Zephyra thrived under their guidance, its people inspired by the courage of two beings who had shown that even the most impossible odds could be overcome. Kale and Lyra continued to explore, defend, and learn, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. They had faced the ultimate threat, and in doing so, had unlocked a future brighter than any had imagined. And as the first stars appeared in Zephyra's violet sky, Kyle and Lyra stood together, ready for whatever adventures, mysteries, and challenges the universe would place before them. United by trust, courage, and the unbreakable connection that had saved a life and awakened a destiny, They had proven one undeniable truth. Heroism knows no species, and the power of selflessness can change worlds. The legend of the hybrid guardian had begun, and its story would inspire generations to come.